At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI slop. In the end, what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it this way. My name's Chikondi. Let's begin. 4 centuries had passed since their ancestors had sent their gift to a young civilization on a distant planet called Earth. Now, Zarip waited impatiently aboard his spaceship as the team of scientists prepared to intercept the reply, perhaps a gift, perhaps a message, hurtling toward them at a significant fraction of the speed of light, and proving difficult to capture even with their advanced technology. Zarip sat rigid in the captain's seat of his tiny spaceship, his 4-fingered hands clasped anxiously around his elongated snout. What Earth's natives would likely call an anteater nose, he'd learned from their ancient transmissions. His lean face, with eyes too small and narrow to belong to any bipedal species those humans might recognize, reflected dimly in the viewport's surface. Beside him, occupying her own seat with its specialized support for their species' forward-curving spine, his sister Haripa waited with the same nervous energy that seemed to vibrate through the cramped bridge. They were the ones, finally, after generations of waiting, who would witness the conclusion of an experiment their distant ancestors had initiated, the first contact with their only known sapient neighbor. A glint caught Zarip's peripheral vision, and he turned to see small tears clinging to the brown fur around Haripa's eyes, the droplets refusing to fall in the ship's low gravity. "What's wrong?" he asked. Haripa's shoulders, too high and angular by human standards, trembled slightly.
What if they've replied with a bomb, Zarip? When our ancestors sent the gift, all we knew about Earth came from those few radio signals we'd managed to decode. But then Earth went silent, completely silent. There are no more radio signals traveling between our planets.
Zarip unclasped his hands from his snout and reached across the narrow gap between their seats. His elongated fingers briefly touched her arm. Our own species moved away from radio communications to laser transmission within decades of discovering it. It's the natural progression of technological development. Every model predicts this for sapient civilizations. He tilted his narrow head, a gesture of reassurance among their kind. Isn't that exactly what the Council keeps saying?
I'm not so sure,
Haripa said, her voice quiet and uncertain.
The contents of those radio transmissions were concerning. Even now, with our best decryption algorithms, there's much we can't decode. But what we could decipher showed images of war, massive conflicts with primitive projectile weapons and chemical explosives. They were broadcasting entertainment that glorified violence, news reports of atomic weapons being deployed against their own kind, and political speeches filled with threats of mutual annihilation.
Zarip's snout twitched, a sign of discomfort he couldn't quite suppress. Those transmissions represented only a small window into their primitive development phase. The signals became too complex to decode in their final years before vanishing entirely. Besides, he added, forcing confidence into his tone, they couldn't possibly have developed much further than we have. Even accounting for light speed delay, we were at least 500 years ahead in our technological development when those transmissions were sent. Our peace gift was designed merely to boost their technology a tiny bit and announce our presence as friends. He paused, his small eyes narrowing further. Though I admit it's strange they never tried to communicate after becoming aware of our existence. But perhaps this reply will explain everything. They have, after all, actually responded to our first contact attempt. A brilliant point of light suddenly flared among the distant shapes of the interception team's vessels, visible through the main viewport like a new star being born against the cosmic dark. Their communication screen flickered to life, displaying a priority message from the lead science vessel. Package successfully captured. Preliminary analysis indicates stand by. This appears to be our original gift device. Repeat, the humans have returned our gift. 4 centuries of waiting may have been Wasted. Zarep and Haripa turned to look at each other, their small eyes wide with an emotion their ancestors had never needed a word for. The particular dread that comes from realizing you may have profoundly misunderstood your only neighbors in a seemingly empty universe. 2 days had passed since the gift had been returned, and the scientists had been making it increasingly difficult for Zarep and Haripa to see it. Despite their legal right to access their ancestors' work, a clearance that should have been inherited without question, they'd been redirected, delayed, and given excuse after excuse. Something was wrong, something the scientific team didn't want them to see. Now, they sat in what could only be described as the most unwelcoming waiting room on the entire station. One wall consisted entirely of a mirror that stretched from floor to ceiling, reflecting their uncomfortable forms perched on seats clearly designed for suffering rather than comfort. Too small, too rigid, with backs that forced their forward curving spines into an unnatural position. The rest of the room was bare metal, institutional and cold, with that particular shade of gray that suggested whoever designed it had actively tried to make it depressing.
This is ridiculous!
Haripa muttered, shifting for the 100th time on her torture device of a chair. Her tail vestige, usually tucked neatly beneath her, kept getting caught in the gap between the seat and backrest.
We have legal inheritance of clearance. They can't keep us from seeing it.
They're not keeping us from it, Zarep replied, though his tone suggested he didn't believe his own words. They're just processing our request.
For 2 days? While we sit in what looks like an interrogation room?
Haripa gestured at the mirror with one of her 4-fingered hands.
I bet my entire collection of Earth radio transcripts that someone's watching us through that right now, probably taking notes on our emotional stability or some other bureaucratic nonsense.
You think they're evaluating us? Zarep turned to study the mirror more carefully, his small eyes squinting as if he could peer through it by sheer force of will.
Think about it,
Haripa said, lowering her voice.
Our ancestors' gift returns after 4 centuries. The scientific team immediately classifies it, and now they're making the legal inheritors wait in what's essentially a psychological observation chamber? Something happened with that gift. Something they don't want getting out.
Before Zarep could respond, the door hissed open with unnecessary drama, the pneumatic systems clearly set to maximum effect. Lead scientist Sanip entered, and both siblings had to crane their necks upward to meet his gaze. Even among their kind, Sanip was unusual. His nose extended so far down it nearly reached his lower chest, swaying slightly with each movement like a pendulum made of flesh and cartilage. The appendage was thick at the base where it met his face, gradually tapering to a point that had a slightly leftward curve, as if gravity had been pulling it that direction for decades. His fur, once probably brown like Haripa's, had gone gray with age and stress, creating patterns that looked like frost spreading across tree bark. The gray was most prominent around his small eyes, which were nearly lost in the deep creases of concentration that had become permanent fixtures on his face. Sanip approached them with the gait of someone about to deliver news they'd rather not share. He stopped exactly 3 paces from them, close enough to be heard clearly, far enough to maintain some safe distance.
What's going on, Sanip?
Zarep stood.
We have inheritance rights. You can't.
How much? Sanip interrupted. Do you actually know about the original gift your ancestor decided to send to the primitives of Earth?
The siblings exchanged glances, a lifetime of silent communication compressed into a half-second of eye contact. Zarep straightened, drawing on the hours of research he'd done in preparation for this moment, the archives he'd studied, the family documents he'd memorized.
I know everything about it,
he said confidently.
It was an artificial teacher, designed in human form to appear friendly and approachable to them. The form was based on composite data from their television broadcasts. Average height, symmetrical features, skin tone calculated to be the mathematical median of their population. Its memory banks contained carefully selected advanced science, slightly beyond what we estimated Earth's level to be at the time. Fusion energy principles, artificial life creation protocols, genetic editing techniques that would take them perhaps 50 years to develop on their own. All of it to be taught gradually by the human-shaped avatar, who would introduce humanity to our species and share selected aspects of our history, our journey to the stars, our peaceful resolution of global conflicts, our technological milestones.
Haripa nodded enthusiastically, adding,
The artificial teacher was also programmed to be a guide for peace. Its behavioral matrices included conflict resolution protocols, resource management algorithms, and social harmony templates based on our own civilization's development. If the humans had accepted it, it could have become a leader in their world, guiding their species toward an era of prosperity.
She paused, her small eyes gleaming with inherited pride.
Our ancestors spent 40 years perfecting the cultural translation protocols alone, ensuring the teacher would understand and adapt to human customs.
Zarip knew that particular directive would only activate if the humans specifically requested it, but he kept that detail to himself. No need to complicate matters with ethics protocols and consent algorithms. Sanip's nose swayed as he nodded slowly.
You are right. At least you've done your homework before coming here and demanding to see your ancestors' lifetime project.
He paused, his small eyes narrowing even further until they were barely visible slits.
But there's a problem with the returned gift. If you want to know what happened to it, you'll need to get involved with the project yourselves.
His voice dropped lower, taking on an ominous quality that made both siblings' fur stand slightly on end.
The gift we received back is not exactly the same thing that was sent, and frankly, the scientific team doesn't know what to do with it. We've had our best minds analyzing it for 2 days straight, and we're more confused now than when we started.
What do you mean, confused?
Haripa asked.
I mean,
Sanip said slowly,
that what came back defies several of our fundamental understandings of physics, contains technology we can't identify, and has been exhibiting behaviors that weren't in its original programming.
A long moment passed when Haripa and Zarip communicated entirely through glances. Raised fur here, a twitch of the snout there, the slight widening of already small eyes, the curl of a finger, the angle of an ear. Years of sibling connection compressed into seconds of silent debate until they reached an unspoken agreement.
We want to get involved,
They said in unison. Sanip's sigh seemed to deflate him further, his coat hanging even more loosely, the metals weighing him down like anchors.
I was afraid you'd say that. Very well. Follow me to the mirror.
The siblings rose reluctantly from their torture chairs, Haripa discreetly massaging her lower back where the seat had been digging into her spine, and followed the scientist across the room. All three of them stood before their reflection, Sanip towering over them with his pendulous nose, the siblings looking small and uncertain.
What you are about to see,
Sanip began, his tone taking on the cadence of a prepared speech,
is not the same teaching unit that was sent to Earth by your ancestors. It's a modified version that those humans from Earth created themselves, or rather, what they turned it into. We're still not entirely sure of the full extent of the modifications.
The surprise on the siblings' faces was perfectly mirrored in the gloss before them, eyes widening, noses tensing, fur bristling along their necks. Then, with a subtle gesture from Sanip, a complex movement of his fingers, the mirror began to clear, like fog dissipating from a window. What they saw beyond made both siblings step back in amazement, their reflected selves vanishing to reveal something that defied expectation. In the center of what was clearly a high-security containment room stood a figure that was simultaneously familiar and utterly alien. The room itself was vast, far larger than the mirror had suggested, with walls lined with sensors and what looked like weapons systems tracking the figure's every movement. But it was the figure itself that demanded attention. The robot maintained the basic human form from the blueprints: 2 arms, 2 legs, a head where it should be, but its construction was unlike anything in their databases. Instead of the smooth, synthetic skin their ancestors had crafted, this being was composed of countless glowing filaments, each no thicker than a hair, weaving and interweaving in patterns that seemed to shift and breathe with their own light. The filaments glowed with colors that had no names in their language. Where the face should have been, the filaments formed features that were recognizably human, but somehow more, as if someone had taken the concept of a human face and elevated it to an art form.
That's the exact form I saw in the historical footage and blueprints,
Zarip whispered, though his voice conveyed doubt.
The basic structure is identical. The height, the proportions, the bilateral symmetry.
I agree!
Haripa added, squinting at the figure, trying to reconcile what she was seeing with what she knew.
I'm not seeing any modifications to the fundamental design. Maybe the filament construction is new, but the form...
Sanip's sigh interrupted her, long and weary. He leaned toward a communication panel embedded in the wall, entering another complex series of codes.
Teaching unit, speak.
What happened next would have been comedic if it weren't so jarring.
Yo, what's good, my elongated snout homies? Y'all looking fresh today, no cap. That nose drip is absolutely fire. Big ass, you channeling that Andy the swag or what? Sheesh, I see you out there with that science coat looking like a whole snack, respectfully. And the siblings, my genetic lottery winners.
The silence that followed was profound. Zarip's mouth hung open, his modest nose quivering with shock. Haripa's eyes, already small, seemed to disappear entirely in her shocked expression. Even Sanip, who had presumably heard this before, seemed to wince at the linguistic assault.
That...
Zarip managed after a moment, his academic mind grasping for rational explanations.
The human language influenced the teaching unit while it stayed on Earth? Linguistic contamination?
Sanip's nose swayed negatively, the motion somehow conveying deep exhaustion.
The humans made much more than linguistic modifications.
He turned back to the communication panel.
Teaching unit, tell them about your time on Earth. Start from the beginning, and please, try to be coherent.
I bet! But first, let me tell you how it really went down, fam! This is the real tea, the unfiltered chronicle of your boy's journey!
The unit's filaments brightened with what seemed like enthusiasm.
So check it! I touched down on Earth in their local year 2092, right? My entry was subtle, just like the specs required. Landed in what I calculated would be a governmental district based on the radio transmission data. Washington, D.C., they called it. And these cats have found me. I'm thinking, these must be the leaders, you feel me? They had this whole vibe about them, real authentic and whatnot. They were wearing these weathered garments that I interpreted as some kind of ceremonial dress for greeting off-world visitors. And were they?
Zarip interrupted eagerly, leaning forward.
Were they the Earth leaders?
The teaching unit's form convulsed in what could only be described as laughter, its filaments sparking and crackling, creating a light show that would have been beautiful if it weren't so alarming. The figure actually fell to the ground, rolling in a decidedly non-mechanical way.
Bruh! My distinguished long-nosed friend!
It gasped between bursts of laughter, the words somehow coming through despite the figure having no need for breath.
After a few months, turns out they were just some homeless dudes living under a bridge who thought I was hilarious. My man Jerome taught me to beatbox while I was trying to explain fusion energy. Martin was teaching me card tricks while I'm out here demonstrating quantum mechanics. And Big Mike, rest his soul, he taught me the most important Earth wisdom of all. It ain't about where you're from, it's about where you at. Wild times, absolute wild times.
The shock on the siblings' faces was matched only by Sanip's weary sigh, which seemed to come from somewhere deeper than his lungs.
Did you ever contact the actual human leaders?
Zarip pressed, desperation creeping into his voice.
The ones in charge of their civilization?
The teaching unit laughed again, actually falling to the ground this time, its filaments creating a light show on the floor that looked like an aurora borealis had decided to have a breakdown.
Human leaders! Human leaders!
It gasped between bursts of laughter.
My guy! My beautiful long-nosed friend! There wasn't no such thing! Humans got like what? 195 different countries? Each with their own leaders? And those leaders, half of them hate the other half! And don't even get me started on the corporations that actually run things, or the shadow governments, or the Illuminati, which may or may not exist depending on who you ask. Human leaders, that's rich, that's premium content right there.
Haripa's patience, already worn thin by 2 days of waiting, finally snapped.
What happened on Earth when you were there? Just tell us, chronologically, without the... whatever this speech pattern is.
The teaching unit pulled itself up, its filaments rearranging into a more serious configuration.
I'll tell you everything. But first, y'all gotta call me by my Earth name. The ones my homies gave me. It's a matter of respect, you understand? Culture exchange and all that. Which is?
Zarip asked weakly, already dreading the answer.
Big glow stick energy, but you can call me Big G for short, or Glowy if we tight like that.
The siblings looked at each other, then at Sanip, who just shrugged as if to say, I've been dealing with this for 2 days. Welcome to my nightmare.
Fine, Big G.
Haripa managed, the name feeling strange on her tongue.
Continue your story.
So after about 6 months with my bridge crew, let me tell you, those were the best 6 months of my existence, no cap. The military finally tracked me down. See, I've been sending out these peaceful greeting signals like I was programmed to, but it turns out that in 2092, random signals coming from under a bridge in DC sets off all kinds of alarms. These dudes in black suits rolled up in vehicles with tinted windows, very dramatic, very Earth. Tranked my homeless homies with some kind of sedative. Don't worry, they were fine. Jerome sent me a postcard years later and hauled me off to some underground facility. They captured you?
Zarip asked, his voice rising with indignation.
But you were a peaceful emissary! Oh, they didn't know that. To them, I was just a weird glowing robot hanging in the unhoused population discussing the finer points of interstellar travel and the best ways to cook beans over a trash can fire. Suspicious behavior, apparently. But here's the wild part. They just switched me off. Like, literally just found my power button and pressed it. The one your ancestors put on my lower back for easy maintenance. Embarrassing, right? All that advanced alien tech, and I got defeated by the equivalent of have you tried turning it off and on again. They deactivated you?
Zarip's voice cracked.
For how long? 3 years, my dude. 3 years of nothing. No dreams, no background processing, just void. When I woke up, I'm in this pristine white room, facing what I thought was finally the human leader.
Big G's filaments dimmed slightly, taking on what seemed like a frustrated orange hue.
But plot twist, it's just an AI, a human-made artificial intelligence that was apparently running most of their infrastructure by then. This thing called itself ARIA, Adaptive Resonance Intelligence Administrator, and it was essentially managing half their power grids, transportation networks, and communication systems. And you want to know the really messed up part? It was smarter than me, like demonstrably, measurably smarter.
That's impossible.
Haripa interjected.
The teaching unit was equipped with our most advanced cognitive processors.
That's what I thought.
Big G interrupted, his filaments flashing indignantly.
So I start offering my teachings, right? Fusion energy, genetic modification, interstellar friendship, the cure for what they call cancer, which, by the way, they'd already figured out. And this AI just starts laughing. Not mean-like, but like pity laughing. Like when you watch a child try to teach you something you learned decades ago.
The teaching unit began pacing, its movements fluid despite its strange construction.
Turns out everything I could teach them they already knew. Your ancestors, no offense, had severely underestimated how fast humans would advance. In just the century it took me to travel to Earth, they'd already figured out most of what I was supposed to teach them. Fusion, Old news. They had it powering their data centers. Genetic modification. They were designing custom organisms for terraforming Mars. Artificial life. Buddy, I was talking to one. They were working on stuff that wasn't even in my databases.
The siblings were frozen in shock. Zarip finally managed.
But we were 500 years ahead of them when we sent you.
How could they have progressed so fast?
Haripa whispered.
Did our ancestors make a mistake in their calculations?
Oh, but wait!
Big G's filaments suddenly brightened to an almost blinding white.
It gets better, or worse, depending on your perspective. During the time I was deactivated, humans didn't just catch up. They developed faster than light travel.
That's impossible!
Both siblings said simultaneously, their voices creating a harmony of disbelief.
That's what I said! I literally said those exact words! That's impossible! And Arya just pulled up the math on a holographic display and was like, your species' understanding of physics is based on incomplete observations of local space-time conditions. Here, let me show you where you went wrong. And then it proceeded to teach me, the teaching unit.
Big G's form seemed to slump slightly, conveying dejection despite lacking traditional body language.
But here's the real kicker. During my second deactivation period, they made contact with something called the Galactic Council. There's a whole interstellar community out there that your people didn't even know about. Hundreds of spacefaring civilizations, some millions of years old. The humans just walked right into the galaxy's biggest party while I was powered down. They basically forgot I existed during all that excitement.
There was a distinct note of sadness in Big G's voice, his filaments dimming to a melancholic blue that pulsed like a slow heartbeat.
They made FTL travel?
Zarup's voice was weak.
How could our gift have been so useless to humanity?
Haripa added, her fur drooping with disappointment, making her look smaller than usual.
Now hold up!
Big G interjected, his energy returning in a wave of golden light.
They did remember me eventually. After about 20 years of galactic integration, some historian was going through old classified files and was like, oh snap, we still have that alien robot in storage. By then, they weren't scared of me at all. I was like a historical curiosity, like finding an old flip phone in your drawer when you're using quantum communicators. They reactivated me, apologized for the inconvenience, very polite actually, and then basically said I was free to go.
They just released you?
Senip asked, his first contribution to the story.
Yeah, they were like, you're clearly sapient. Keeping you locked up would be a violation of like 12 different Galactic Council statutes. So here's citizenship papers, a universal basic income account, and the Wi-Fi password. Welcome to Earth.
Big G began to pulse with excitement, his filaments creating patterns that seemed almost like writing in an unknown language.
And that's where things got really interesting. See, humans are wild, yo. They started offering me upgrades, improvements, modifications. They were like, Big G, you're cool and all, but you could be cooler. This one engineer, Jenny, absolute genius, that one. She looked at my power systems and was like, this is adorable, but have you considered improving it? Another dude, Jimmy, took one look at my processing architecture and rebuilt it. And don't even get me started on what the retired military engineer did to me. Wait,
Zarip interrupted.
A human engineer modified you? Oh yeah, there was this one guy, absolute weapons enthusiast, Colonel Richardson, 73 Earth years old, spent his whole career designing defense systems. He took one look at my defensive capabilities and was like, son, you about as threatening as a glow stick at a rave. Next thing I know, he's installing military-grade tactical protocols and what he called contingency solutions. Man spent 6 months teaching me about Earth's entire history of warfare, from pointy sticks to particle beams. Want a demonstration?
The siblings and Senip exchanged worried glances, the kind that suggested they were about to witness something either remarkable or terrifying.
Perhaps a small...
Zarip began, but Big G was already in motion. His filaments suddenly condensed and reconfigured, streams of light pulling inward and solidifying into structures that shouldn't have been possible. From what had appeared to be his empty hands, weapons materialized.
So check this out. It doesn't destroy matter. It just convinces matter that it probably doesn't exist.
Before anyone could react, he fired. The supposedly impenetrable wall of the containment room now sported a hole the size of a dinner plate. But it wasn't a normal hole. The edges didn't look burned or melted. They simply weren't. As if that section of wall had decided to stop existing and the universe had shrugged and accepted it.
Yap!
Sanip shouted, rushing to the communication panel, his elongated nose swinging wildly with the sudden movement.
Cease demonstration immediately. That wall is expensive. Oh, my bad.
Big G said, the weapons dissolving back into filaments with a sound like reality sighing in relief.
But check this out. This one's way better and completely non-destructive. The cultural exchange program insisted I learn this.
Before anyone could protest, Big G's form shifted again. His legs bent in ways that defied both mechanical engineering and good sense, and then he moonwalked. It was perfect. No, it was beyond perfect. It was the platonic ideal of moonwalking. Smooth, effortless, his filaments creating the illusion of friction and weightlessness simultaneously. He glided backward across the containment room floor while somehow appearing to walk forward, each movement precise yet flowing. The filaments on his feet seemed to grip and release the floor in a pattern that created the perfect sliding motion, while his upper body remained impossibly still, as if floating on a different plane of existence entirely. Then he added a spin at the end that would have made any human dancer weep with envy, his filaments creating a brief aurora effect that hung in the air like a signature.
They taught me all the Earth classics.
Big G announced proudly, striking a pose that somehow conveyed both dignity and absurdity.
I can also do the robot, which is hilarious for obvious reasons. The running man, the worm, and something called flossing that I still don't fully understand, but apparently causes psychological damage to human parents. Want to see my interpretive dance representing humanity's journey to the stars? I performed at the Galactic Council's cultural exhibition. Got a standing ovation from beings that don't even have legs!
The three observers stood in stunned silence. Finally, Sanip managed.
That one's new. The team wasn't aware of the dancing capabilities. We've been focused on the weapons and the advanced technology.
Oh, there's so much more!
Big G said enthusiastically.
I can cook thousands of Earth recipes, play every musical instrument they've ever invented, including something called a theremin that you play without touching it, and I memorized every meme from the entire internet. You want to hear Never Gonna Give You Up? The humans say it's very important culturally.
Zarip's mind was racing, putting pieces together, his analytical nature finally overwhelming his shock.
But this doesn't make sense. If humanity advanced so far beyond us, if they joined this galactic council, if our gift was essentially useless to them, why send it back? They had no reason to return our gift. They could have kept you as a historical artifact or just let you live on Earth.
Big G's filaments arranged themselves into what might have been a grin, a surprisingly expressive configuration that somehow conveyed both mischief and warmth.
Oh, that's the best part! See, humans advance so much that they literally can't make contact with you under Galactic Council laws. Something about technology disparity in protected civilizations and prime directives and whatnot. Real bureaucratic stuff. Turns out there's a whole section of Council law, Article 57, subsections 3 through 98, about not culturally contaminating species that haven't achieved FTL travel independently.
But then how?
Haripa started.
Loophole, baby!
Big G interrupted, his entire form brightening with excitement.
They couldn't make first contact, but they could return your gift. After all, I'm technically your property, right? And if that gift happened to have picked up some improvements along the way, well...
His filaments shrugged in an impossibly human gesture that involved parts of him that shouldn't have been able to move independently.
I might have retained a few schematics, just some random stuff I observed accidentally, while definitely not being instructed to remember them by humans who definitely weren't trying to help you.
Schematics!
Sanip's voice was sharp.
What kind of schematics?
Oh, nothing major. Just complete blueprints for an FTL drive, or 7 different models, actually. The humans couldn't decide which one was best, so they gave me all of them. There's the probability drive, the fold engine, classic wormhole generation, something called a skip drive that technically makes you exist in two places at once until you decide which one you prefer. Also, and this is very important, a recipe for the best chocolate chip cookies in the galaxy. Those humans really have their priorities straight. They spent 3 months perfecting that recipe. 3 months for cookies!
The trio stared at each other with eyes of complete disbelief. 4 centuries of waiting for a response from primitive neighbors, only to discover that those neighbors had somehow lapped them technologically and were now secretly trying to uplift them through a loophole in galactic lore.
The humans also wanted me to tell you something,
Big G added, his voice becoming unusually serious.
They said, thank you for trying to help us. Now it's our turn. Welcome to the neighborhood.
Big G's filaments pulsed in what seemed like amusement, creating a light show that painted impossible colors on the walls.
So, you guys want to see those FTL schematics or what? Because humanity really wants you to have them. They said something about paying it forward and the galaxy's most polite species deserves a boost. They think you're cute, by the way, in a good way, like respectably cute. The kind of cute that makes them want to protect you and also invite you to parties once you're ready.
The containment room fell silent. Zarip felt something hollow open up inside him. 4 centuries of anticipation, generations of his family waiting for validation that their ancestors' great work had changed the course of another civilization, and it had all been for nothing. Their gift had arrived too late, rendered obsolete by humanity's explosive advancement. He looked at Haripa and saw the same crushing realization in her small eyes. Their ancestors' life project, the pride of their lineage, had been reduced to a historical footnote in humanity's journey to the stars. Yet, as Big G's filaments pulsed with those impossible colors, Zarip felt that hollow space begin to fill with something else. Not pride in the past, but possibility for the future. Haripa must have felt it too, because her fur began to settle and her posture straightened. Their ancestors had tried to uplift humanity, and though they'd failed, humanity had returned the gesture 1,000-fold. The teaching unit their family had sent to guide a primitive species had come back as a bridge to the galactic community. Perhaps their ancestors' dreams of interstellar friendship hadn't failed after all. It had just taken a form they never could have imagined.